Is burnout the curse of the high achiever?
It's a side effect of not being conscious of yourself and taking care of yourself. It's not a rite of passage. Let me explain what it is. The World Health Organization has actually defined it as a disease. And let me tell you why. It's not the same as stress. People don't understand that stress and burnout are different. Burnout is accumulated stress that has not been managed over time. So when we live our lives with our sympathetic nervous system on, that's the fight or flight that says there's a threat because you're not meeting the deadline, or you didn't get that account, or you've got to get here quickly. Your body is responding as if you're under red alert 24/7. First of all, it kills you. There's something called karoshi in Japan. We don't have that word in our culture. It means death from overwork. It kills you and it destroys your relationships. And actually, we have so much data showing it undermines your career. It does not help you get to where you want to go. It actually undermines it, and you don't even realize it. People who take time in the inside lane, who are more balanced, actually go further and quicker up the career ladder. We know that for a fact.
Do you ever feel chained to your desk? Are you constantly thinking about work and find it very challenging to switch off? I wonder, have you ever hidden the fact that you were still working or even at work from a loved one because you knew that they would disapprove? If this sounds like you, today's podcast is going to provide you with the tools to continue to perform, but without burning out. I am deeply honored to have Dr. Bryan Robinson with us today, a world-leading psychotherapist and burnout expert, the founder and chief architect officer at Comfort Zones Digital, professor emeritus at the University of North Carolina. Dr. Bryan Robinson also writes for Forbes and is the author of over 40 books, including Chained to the Desk, a guidebook for workaholics. Dr. Robinson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charlene. It's great to be here. The new name of the book, by the way, is Chained to the Desk in a Hybrid World. And the subtitle is A Guide to Work-Life Balance. That's the latest revision of the title.
And perhaps that prompts the first question that I have, because I know that you've had several revisions of this book. What has prompted the revision? Is it the post-pandemic world that we've entered into, the globalization of the laptop lifestyle? Tell us a little bit more about this edition.
It is the post-pandemic world we're living in. Hybrid world is becoming the norm. There's a lot of controversy right now in the business world, as I'm sure your listeners know. More and more companies are saying, let's get back to the office, and more customers or workers are saying, no way, we're looking for jobs where we can have balance. And you're hearing that word more and more, work-life balance. There was a time when it kind of went by the wayside, but now, especially among the Gen Zs, you're hearing that we're not going to live our life the way you guys did and burn ourselves out. We're going to take better care of ourselves. However, there's still some of us who are continuing to work relentlessly and to put work above and beyond everything else, and wonder why we're physically not energetic. We have physical problems. Our relationships are crumbling. Our kids are acting out. And I could go on and on and on about that. But there are different kinds of work addiction. I remember when I first started talking about this, the crew in the background, when I was doing a TV show with Snicker, at the whole idea of work addiction, and people still kind of, dismiss the idea, but it is a real thing because I've experienced it. That's why I know it inside out and outside in, and I'm on the other end of it now, and I can talk about how I got there, but I want to see if there's a question you want to ask me, or you want me to just keep going. I could talk. You can see once I start talking, I just keep going, Charlene.
Well, I love that. The first question that's really on my mind is, For some of our listeners, it may be the first time that they hear the term work addiction, and actually it may take a few by surprise. So perhaps could we start there?
Sure. What work addiction is, it's the inability to turn it off. It's not, the ABC store does not create alcoholics. The supermarket does not create compulsive eaters. Work addiction is something we bring to the workplace. It's not created by the workplace. It's enabled by the workplace. But if I'm a workaholic, it's something that I'm trying to do outside to fix something inside is the best way I know how to say it. And for some people, it's low self-esteem. For some people, it's control. For me, as a professor at the university, it was controlling my anxiety, which I didn't even know I had. I'll give you an example. I worked days, nights, weekends, holidays. There was no such thing as a boundary. There was no time off. Even when we went to the beach, my family would go with other families and we'd have a big house and everybody would say they were going to go for a walk on the beach. And I would yawn and stretch and pretend I was going to sleep. And they thought that was really cool to see me resting. Well, I call this, this is like an alcoholic sneaking this bottle, because what I was doing was waiting until they got out of eyesight. And then I would pull out the project that I was working on and work feverishly like an alcoholic taking a drink until I saw them coming back, because my family complained so much about my not just relaxing and being with the, socially with other people. So when I heard them coming back, I put the project away and pretend I'd been in bed sleeping, which now, as I say, sounds really sick because I was sick. So there's some of us, I call that work infidelity. It's like we're working in secret. I've had so many high-rolling people tell me this. I had one woman tell me her husband complained because she worked all the time and their marriage was falling apart. And so she said, I'm going to start a workout class. And so she started going, she told him she was going to hot yoga. And at the end of the workday, she would put on her tights and sprinkle bottled water all over her and then go home. And he thought she was working out when in fact she was working in the office. So this is work infidelity. It's like the desperation that some of us have to grab onto work for our anxiety or for controlling our lives when we really can't control. I want to say one more thing about my desperation at the university. I can remember one weekend in particular when I had nothing planned for the weekend. It was totally open, which I love now, but then it was terrifying. Now, this may sound strange to some people, but having total openness and not knowing what was going to happen was terrifying for me at the time. So what did I do? I looked through the campus news and saw a call for grants for research. So I took that newsletter, folded it under my arm, and I remember sighing with such calm that I knew what I would be doing for the weekend. That was, now that I look back, I understand it was a way to have certainty, in quotation marks, when my life was uncertain. And that came from actually a history of never knowing what was going to happen next and getting blindsided, growing up in an alcoholic home. And one of the things I've found is many of us who grow up in a dysfunctional family, a toxic family, end up working around the clock to try to control something on the inside that has not been addressed.
I'm really grateful you're sharing this. And I was reflecting on what you were saying as you were saying it and thinking about my journey as well. And when I burned out back when I was a lawyer, and I remember vividly hiding the fact that I was working from my ex-husband, who would wonder what I was up to on my laptop. And I remember pretending to be shopping when I was working, because he would disapprove or not even understand that I could still be so consumed by my work at this time. And this is very interesting that you can get to this point.
You know, in the book, I've interviewed a number of well-known people, one of whom is Alanis Morissette, who talks about, she calls them her nervous breakdowns because of her work addiction. She couldn't turn it off. She couldn't stop. Her story is in there. And Arianna Huffington, whom most of the listeners probably know, she's the founder. Actually, she founded Huffington Post, and now she has founded, and she's the CEO of Thrive Global. And what happened with her is she passed out, hit her head on the desk from burnout, and ended up breaking her cheekbone. And that was a wake-up call for her. I spoke with Jewel, the singer, and many, many other people like Aaron Brockovich, whom many people will recognize, the movie Aaron Brockovich with Julia Roberts, won an Academy Award, and her working. So there are a lot of personal stories and some unknown people or not as well-known people talking about how the work addiction took over their lives and in some cases destroyed their lives and how they recovered from it. So I want people to know who are listening, this is a real thing. Personally have experienced it, and there are ways out of it. And I'd like to talk about that.
I would love to talk about that. Absolutely, please.
I would like to tell you what my turning point was. And remember, I was working day and night, and totally unaware that there was anything wrong with that, except my spouse on hands and knees begged, literally. I'm kind of ashamed to even say this to people, but on hands and knees begging me for time. And I was furious that how dare you interfere with my career. And then now that I look back at that, I realize just how work and producing and controlling my world was everything. But that was because I hadn't looked inside to see what is that. So one of the things I like to talk about is most of us who are poo-pooing what I'm saying, who are discounting it, I mean, I was a scientist. I did research at the university. If I couldn't see it, it didn't exist. I still am a scientist, but now I know there's another whole world, another way of being in the world. I will tell you now, I am not driven. I am not driven by an outside force, by someone else who says you have to do it by this date. I am not driven by that voice inside my head that used to beat me up and just kick me around. I'm the captain of my ship now. I am drawn, not driven. And that's the difference. I am drawn because of course, I meet expectations and I meet deadlines, but I do it in an entirely different way. And let me tell you what woke me up. We had at the university 10 Tibetan monks come to the campus to perform. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this, but it's pretty incredible. They have incredible costumes, headdresses, and instruments. And while they were preparing for the performance, someone told me that there was a picket line outside. There were demonstrators with signs that said Buddhists worship idols and they're of the devil. So there were these fundamentalists who were welcoming our guests with judgment and ridicule. When the monks found out, guess what they did? I was pissed. I was angry. But the monks smiled. They all went outside. At that point, these picketers were singing Jesus Loves Me, holding hands. They joined hands with the protesters and sang Jesus Loves Me with a smile on their face. It freaked these people out so badly they disbanded. But all they were doing was just bringing compassion and love without judgment to these people. And the power in that blew me away. I remember thinking, you've all probably seen or heard about the movie when Harry met Sally, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know that scene in the restaurant at Kat's Diner in New York when she's feigning an orgasm and the
Yes.
customers, I'll have what she's having. That's
Yes.
exactly, I thought, oh my God, I want what they've got. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it came from, but I want to be that way. I want to be in the world. I want to be drawn from who I really am. I don't want to be forced or controlled. But in my attempts to try to control my life, it controlled me. So I started an adventure of letting go, finding out how to do that. And I'm not talking about just sitting and meditating. I mean, I don't mean just meditating, but it's really about going inside in many different ways. It doesn't have to be meditation. Think about yourself as a two-lane highway. One lane is outside. Now, that's probably where most of the listeners right now spend their time, in the outside lane, which is great. I mean, I spend time in the outside lane too. We have to take care of business. We have to take care of the conditions in our lives. However, balance is about spending a little bit of time in that inside lane. The inside lane is where most of us avoid. And that's what I was avoiding. As I started just to take time to be inside, and I'll give you some examples, it changed my life. uh, I started to really understand what I was doing and why I was doing it. I started to realize who I really am. I was not all the books that I wrote. I wasn't the professor giving lectures. I wasn't the person doing community work. Of course, those were aspects of me, but I didn't even know who I was. It had been eclipsed. So as I went inside, and it can just be like sitting and closing our eyes and going inside and just watching what's there. Because what happens is we start to have images or we'll have memories, and sometimes we'll even hear a part of us speak to us. Let me give you an example. I think most people can understand this. This is just an example of how it works. Most of us have that critical voice that says, you have to, you must, you should. Psychologists actually call that masturbation or shitty thinking, right? Because it drives us, which means we become a passenger on the ship, not the captain of the ship. So if you just listen, you have to pause and listen to what is that voice saying. Now, your critic is not bad. It feels bad when it calls us names sometimes. It says you have to, you must. It puts pressure on us. The reason it does that, and this is the neuroscience, it wants us to do well. It wants us to perform. However, it backfires because what it does is it drains our energy, it burns us out, and it prevents us from seeing who we really are. The critical voice is not me. It is an aspect of me. So when I hear it, I talk back to it, which some people might think sounds crazy. But now we have data, we have hard research and clinical data showing self-talk is one of the best tools we have to find ourselves. So when I talk back to the critic without fighting it, I'm not fighting it. If you fight it, it won't work. It's like if you're in a riptide and you fight it, it will drown you. If you're in a riptide, you relax and float, not fight, parallel to the shore, and it brings you in. If you fight your critic, it gets stronger, and then you become enemies. Your critic is not your enemy, it's your friend. So when I'm aware of the critic, that's the first A, I acknowledge it. That's the second A. And when I acknowledge it, I'll say something like, oh, so you think I'm a jerk. You think I'm not going to be able to do this. Okay, I hear you. Now, I'm not debating it. I'm not steamrolling over it. I'm not fighting it. I'm not dismissing it. I'm not ignoring it. I'm paying attention to it, which is the opposite of what most people do. And then I allow it to be there. It can't sit in my seat, but it can sit in the seat beside me. And sometimes I'll say, pull up a chair, have a seat, let's have a cup of coffee and talk about this. Now, I know this sounds strange, but what it does is it reifies or concretizes this part so that you can communicate with it. And already, as you do that, you feel separation from it. It's not you. You start to feel it's an aspect of you, and you get a third party perspective of it, and you feel calmer, you feel clearer. I call that your central command center. Simply by using those 3 A's, you are able to communicate with not just the critic, you can communicate with your worry, your anxiety, your anger, any aspect of yourself if you follow the AAA, is what I call it, process. Now, we all can see our skeletal system on an MRI or a CT scan. You can see certain bones through your skin. You cannot see these parts. That's why we use this mechanism to concretize it. And once you concretize it, it gives you a way to communicate. And you start to realize that's not who I am. I'm not my anger. I'm not my anxiety. I'm not my judgment. I'm me. And I know who that is now because it uncovers me simply by interacting with these aspects of ourselves. So it was the monks, that experience, setting me out on a journey that helped me remember or find who am I? And those of us who work 24/7 around the clock, who don't have intimate relationships, who've lost touch with our kids, who are not healthy because we're burning out, we're lost. And simply spending a little bit of time on the inside, just starting with, we could do this now, but I don't want to take up the time to do it. But the first step is just sitting for 1 minute, and you can time it. 1 minute out of your day is all it takes to start. And just listen to the sounds, your gurgling stomach, the ambient sounds, traffic, airplane, somebody talking in the distance. Don't try to memorize them. Just notice all the different sounds. And if you do that, and if you can do it even for 5 minutes, you will start to become aware of things you're not aware of. You will start to see your life differently. That's just the beginning, is listening to the outside sounds. Then go inside and listen to what's going on inside. Images you have, thoughts you have, feelings. No, don't try to fix anything. Just look, just watch, like you're looking at a blemish on your hand. And you will learn so much about yourself that will take you to being drawn instead of driven.
Mm. Those are the ones that you refer to in your book as your microchillers.
Yes, absolutely.
I like those a lot.
Microchillers. Yeah, we don't have to. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he said, "Meditation, man, that's not my bag, and I don't have time to sit down on the floor and cross my legs and make these weird sounds." And of course not. That's not what we're talking about. A microchiller is when I just take 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, we know will change your life just by going inside and watching what's there. Think about a car that you're driving. You got to have both gas and brakes, right? If you have all gas, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn the motor out or go off the cliff. If you have all brakes, you won't get out of your driveway. So this is the brakes. The inside lane is where we find the brakes for 1 minute, 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there. And it's just paying attention in the present moment. And we do call that mindfulness. Most of us who are driven are in the future, thinking about what we're going to do, or we're in the past regretting what we did or didn't do right. And that means we're not living. Living is being in the present moment. And the way to get there is just take a breath and just listen to outside noises, or go inside and pay attention to things that you're ignoring about yourself.
And how quickly could someone listening to us right now go through your triple A's method?
Actually, it's really quick. You have to kind of get familiar with it, and you have to practice it. Like if you want to build your muscles, you don't just sit and expect that to happen. You go to the gym, you lift weights, and you practice. So it's the same concept. And after you practice the AAA, I'm aware of my anger. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to talk to it right now. Hey, anger. Okay, I see you're here. Talking to it helps you separate from it, right? And having a dialogue with it. Sometimes it'll talk back to you, and you just talk to it like it's a person. And then the third thing, let it be there. Don't ignore it or try to get rid of it. You can't get rid of it, but pay attention to it and it will calm down. That's the miraculous part. Paying attention to these inside parts of us, calm them down. And you develop a muscle memory after a while if you just start practicing it for 2 or 3 minutes a day.
Mm. And one question that's on my mind is burnout the curse of the high achiever? In other words, is it almost a rite of passage for ambitious, driven, passionate type A professionals?
It's a side effect of not being conscious of yourself and taking care of yourself. It's not a rite of passage. It actually, let me explain what it is. The World Health Organization has actually defined it as a disease. And let me tell you why. It's not the same as stress. People don't understand that stress and burnout are different. Burnout is accumulated stress that has not been managed over time. So when we live our lives with our sympathetic nervous system on, that's the fight or flight that says there's a threat because you're not meeting the deadline, or you didn't get that account, or you've got to get here quickly. It's your body is responding as if you're under red alert 24/7. That, first of all, it kills you. Well, there's something called karoshi in Japan. We don't have that word in our culture. It means death from overwork. It kills you and it destroys your relationships. And actually, we have so much data showing it undermines your career. It does not help you get to where you want to go. It actually undermines it, and you don't even realize it. People who take time in the inside lane, who are more balanced, actually are go further and quicker up the career ladder. We know that for a fact. Burnout is not something you recover from right away. That's what I want people to know. Stress, we can de-stress, we can go work out, we can meditate, we can eat good food, we can take a walk, listen to music. Burnout, no, sorry, it's too late, because once you burn out, you cannot take a vacation, you cannot take time off. It literally causes a debilitation, physical and mental exhaustion, and it's going to require a lot of rehab to get through that. I just wanted people to know that.
And I'm so glad you raised that point, because I actually wanted to ask you, in your expert opinion as a psychotherapist, do you think that burnout can lead to PTSD?
Well, I think sometimes burnout is the result of PTSD. And it can also lead to it. I'll tell you why. A lot of people who have PTSD, and I think as I took my journey, looking back, I think I did experience PTSD as a child in several ways. But having experienced PTSD and not getting that taken care of, then the work becomes a way to control that anxiety from the PTSD, if that makes sense. But it can also lead to it. It can be traumatizing having burnout. So it's a cyclic kind of thing. If we don't take measures to prevent it, and then we do burn out, then we will have to take those measures to recover. Then we're forced to.
And it's so often that we hear this story. It's become quite a common story, right? Leader, very ambitious professional, is a rising star, and then they hit a wall, they have a heart attack, they have a cardiovascular incident.
Right.
They have a diagnosis, divorce, depression,
Right.
burnout, hit a wall.
If it's cancer, we can't see the cancer, but it can be diagnosed. If it's a physical issue. But when we talk about burnout, it seems nebulous and hazy, and you can't see it under a microscope, but it's real. That's what I want people to know. It exists, and it can happen to anybody who's listening.
And is your belief that we, as a community, as therapists, as burnout prevention expert, do you believe our efforts are best directed at the prevention mechanism or at helping those who are deep in the burnout phase? Of course, it can be both, but where do you think really the magic lies?
Yeah, the magic is in prevention, as it is in most things. One of the things, and I've been there, if someone told me, hey, relax, take it easy, I totally dismissed it. I thought, yeah, that's easy for you to say. I got things to do. I want to get tenured. I want to get this book written. I've got these projects, which was true. But underneath, if I had taken just a little bit of time and spent in that inside lane that I mentioned, I wouldn't have gotten to the place that I got to, the burnout, the physical problems, my marriage crumbling. We revived it, so I'm still with the love of my life. However, the overworking just almost destroyed it. No friendships, people not understanding why I was never available. Well, to me, I saw them as people trying to interrupt my career, which is not what it was at all. So it really requires a perceptual shift and almost like a bird's eye view of how we're living our lives, so we can sit on the riverbank and look at the water we're swimming in. And most of us hard drivers are in the water swimming, and we never go in the inside lane and look at what we're doing from the outside. That gives us insight, and talking to using that AAA gives us insight, because when you're talking to if I'm talking to my anger or my anxiety, I get an automatic bird's eye view of what is going on inside of me. That's another reason that's so helpful. You have more objectivity, and you're not living a subjective life. We've got to have a little bit of objectivity. That's the brakes. The subjectivity is pedal to the metal. And pedal to the metal is not going to work. It's not going to give you the life you think it's going to give you. Only if you have the brakes once in a while. You've got to have the BRAKES brakes and the BREAKS brakes. We call them micro brakes or microchillers. And data at the university, or actually not the university, but North Carolina State University, they've actually done empirical research showing people who take micro breaks have more energy, less exhaustion, they're more successful, they have more clarity, and their moods are higher, and they're bigger performers, and they're more engaged at work. So we have hard data. This is not woo-woo stuff. This is real science that I'm talking about. So I want everybody to know that there are science-backed underpinnings to everything I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. Do you think you could possibly walk us through that method briefly live, if I could step into the shoes
sure.
of a high achiever and someone
and
that might be...
Yeah, and this is in the book, Chained to the Desk in a Hybrid World. If you want to read more, the steps are all in the book. But yeah, let's take you through that. So are you aware of any part of yourself? It could be judgment, criticism, anxiety, anger, fear, worry.
So should I step into a fictional client's shoes? Would that be helpful for the purpose of this conversation?
Sure, if you'd like to do that.
Okay, I'll do that then. Yes, anger.
Okay, so the first step is being aware. And I want to say, sometimes we're so into our work, we don't have the awareness. And so you got to spend some time sharpening your awareness and really paying attention to what's going on inside. And that's going to be so helpful as you start to realize what's going on inside and paying attention. So anger. So once you're aware that you're angry, and some people don't are angry and don't know it. So once you realize it, then you acknowledge it. So acknowledge your anger just as if it's a person who just walked into your studio. And can you do that out loud? You can do it out loud or inside, but just for the listeners and viewers, can you do it out loud?
It's red. It's almost like a big fire. It's
What you're doing this is really good. What she's doing, guys, she's concretizing it. She has an image of it, which is great. That helps you have a communication with it. Acknowledging it is speaking to it as if it's a person. So acknowledging would be, oh, I see you just popped up. What's up? What's going on? So just like it's a person, acknowledge it on the inside.
I can see this red
And
flame.
speak to it. Speak to it.
It's getting bigger and
speak to it as if it's a person. I see you're here.
I see you're here, and
Good. Yeah.
I can feel the burn. I can feel the heat, and
right.
I can feel the chest tightening with that heat. It's like a heat wave.
Yeah. And when you're feeling it, you can even ask it can you move back just a little bit? And it will. Just on the inside, you can say, can you step back a little bit? You know, if you're at a party and you meet someone that you really want to get to know, if they put their nose right up against yours, you're automatically going to step back or get them to step back. So when the part that you're talking to, when you feel it, then you want to have a little bit of distance from it so you can get to know it. So you can ask it to move back just a tiny bit on the inside, and it will. Try that and see.
It's a bit too close right now. It's a bit too hot. It's a bit too big. I want you to back down for me.
Okay. See if it will.
Maybe I need to put a little water on the fire to cool it down.
It will usually do it on its own. Is it okay for it to be here? That's the allowing it to be not in your seat, but in a seat beside you or close to you so you can get to know it better. Is that okay?
Yes, it is.
Okay, there you go. And that's kind of the cherry on the cake, or the icing on the cake, is allowing it to be there so you can get to know it better. Now, as you do that, do you have any images? Well, you did have images of the fire. Were there any memories that went with that, or any words that anger was saying to you?
It was like a nagging voice, sort of more, almost like an alarm, you know, this never-ending drill. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So you can just imagine it sitting down, and you can ask it questions or say, how can we work together? Because you need your anger. Anger is not a bad thing, by the way. We need it. If somebody's coming at you with a knife, you want to have as much adrenaline as you can. Or if your house is on fire, right? So it's not about getting rid of it. If you don't have it, you can't survive. But we just don't need it as much as it shows up.
And this is a tool that we can use with anxiety and fear, right? Oh, yeah. So it's very versatile.
Yes. If I were to do that right now I'm not feeling any anxiety, but if I work with it as an entity, then I can right now I can talk to it because it's something that shows up every once in a while, but not near as much as it used to. And so if I'm aware and I'm looking to my right, and I would say to it, oh, hey, how you doing? Pull up a chair. Now notice I'm speaking very calmly to it. That doesn't always happen because sometimes we get excited when a part is up. Let's say somebody talks over me in a meeting, and I'm aware that I'm angry and anxious. Then I might say, yeah, I know you're really pissed about what just happened, and you have a right to be. Now I'm talking to it like it's another person. And that's my acknowledgement of it. And as I do that, I feel calmer because it gets my attention, and that's what it wants. And it wants me to take care of it. And at the same time, I'm allowing it to be here as a part of me, as a passenger on my ship, not as the captain. That's the key. I am not my anger. I am not my anxiety. Uh, I used to think I was my anxiety. It was me. And I spent all my time trying to assuage it. I don't have to do that anymore because it's separated from me. We call that unblending. It's not, it's actually organic. I don't feel it when it shows up. I feel separate from it. And that helps me deal with it.
And have you found in your experience that this work addiction that you speak about and this burnout work hand in hand? In other words, is every professional who's experiencing burnout also a work addict?
Not every person. There are different kinds of work addictions too. There are different levels. I have a test in the book that viewers and listeners can take to find out.
I took your test.
Oh, you did? You want to share where you failed?
Well, actually, you know what was interesting is I took it twice. Once as a version of me back when I burned out. So I step into the shoes of my previous self, because I know you do a lot of this work, your old self and your new self. And so I did do that. I was definitely a work addict. But I'm pleased to report that right now, as the present self, I seem not to be an addict anymore. So there you go. There is progress.
Oh, that's
but
great.
I was scoring 73 on the previous version of myself. So definitely quite high on the spectrum of addiction of work.
Right. That's right. Folks can also go on my website and take it electronically.
Yes.
If you're going to tell them what my website is, in a few seconds, you can take it. So one of the things I want to say to folks who are watching and listening is we're not talking about not working hard. Hard work put us on the moon. And when we start talking about workaholism, people say, well, what's wrong with hard work? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about extreme obsessive compulsive thoughts, extreme behaviors, as I described, that I used to have, in which we can't turn it off. It's like we don't know how. And I've had so many people say, I just can't control it. Hard work, as I said, gave us vaccinations for COVID. So don't confuse workaholism with hard work, because they're not the same. If I'm a healthy hard worker, I'm in my office thinking about being on the ski slopes. That's balance. If I'm a work addict, I'm on the ski slopes dreaming about being back at work. So it's really about being able to be present with the people you love, present with yourself, present when you're enjoying your friends and having social celebrations and workaholics, extreme work addicts cannot do that. Mm-hmm. They just can't until they start some of these new different practices that helps them go inside. Mm-hmm. I call it stepping inside, in the inside lane, for just the microchillers, a few minutes a day. And the book it's full of little exercises that everybody can do, the microchillers.
And what if we have somebody listening to this and identifying to a lot of the symptoms of the work addiction, but also fearing that if they learn some of the method to prevent burnout or to start to meditate or be more mindful, what if they fear that they will be less ambitious, less driven, and therefore less successful? Because I hear this a lot, but I like that I'm chasing. I want to continue to be. So what would you say to that person?
That is a great question. You're right. I hear it all the time. If I stop, I'll become a slacker. And you can see
Right.
that's the all or none thinking that undergirds work addiction. It undergirds all the addictions, alcoholism, drug addiction, food addiction, that all, it's either all or nothing. I can either work or I can take care of my kids. I can't do both. That kind of thinking. But absolutely, if you are thinking that if you start applying some of these tools, that it's going to dilute your ambition, you are so wrong. I promise you, it will add to your ambition. It will strengthen your ability to close a deal, to get where you want to in your career. It will not take away from it. I know you may think that, it may feel that way, but we're talking about putting the brakes on the car so you don't go off the cliff, so you don't burn out the engine. We're not talking about sitting in your driveway. We're talking about you've got to have the gas, which is the sympathetic nervous system, and you got to have the brakes, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, uh, which is the rest and digest. But you don't have to sleep all day. You don't have to rest all day. We're not talking about one extreme or the other. We're talking about the middle way, is what we call it, the shades of gray. How can you have a little bit of both? It's not one or the other, it's both. That's what's going to get you to the top of your career.
Well, I can say that I was very reassured when I took your test to see that the new version of me was classified as, I will read it out, you're not considered a workaholic, but you are a hard worker instead of a workaholic. I like
Yeah,
that. I thought,
that's
oh,
right.
that's good because I still want to
Yeah,
be a hard worker. So I
absolutely.
did like that.
I am writing. I've written 2 novels. They're murder mysteries, one of which is coming out this spring. I've written 40 books, as you said. I have a private practice. I have a new podcast that will air in March called "How's That Working for You?" Um, Gosh, I can go on, and I do have a family, and so people hear that thinking,
And
"Oh, you."
dogs, beautiful dogs,
Oh, I have wonderful. I have 3 dogs. Uh,
stunning dogs.
they're beautiful. They're golden doodles. But people see that and they say, "Oh, you're not a workaholic." I mean, you are a workaholic. You haven't recovered. But here's the deal. And that just tells you that I have more energy and I'm older. I have more energy, more excitement about what I'm doing. I'm like a kid in a candy store, but I'm doing it in a different way. I am more productive and happier than I've ever been in my life, but I don't feel stressed. I don't feel driven. I feel drawn. I feel like I get to do these things because I want to do these things. So that's an example of what it's like on the other side. It's not that you're going to become less ambitious. If anything, my career has taken off since I have gone into recovery. And I do want to mention to folks who are listening, if there is something called Workaholics Anonymous, that's a 12-step program equivalent to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's another way to help people get to recovery. And they're all over the world. So you can check that out online if you need that kind of help, or go see a therapist. Usually, after I do a talk like this, I get emails and text from family members more than I do people who are actually in it. But I'm happy to hear from anybody and help people get the help they need. That's why I do the podcast. The main thing is to spread the word that workaholism is not a good thing, as people used to say. It's a damaging thing. It can kill you.
Mm-hmm. And in your experience, you've seen success stories with those 12
Oh yeah,
steps approach as well?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and in the book, I write about a lot of those success stories among people that we know, very, very famous people, and among people who are extraordinary, who are not in the limelight, just from janitor to judge, from, as I mentioned, Alanis Morissette, to men who have been CEOs and who are still CEOs, but are working in a different way.
Well, thank you very much for sharing all your insights. And I think that your book is terrific, and I will make sure to share the notes and all the articles as well. And I'm very grateful for this conversation. Thank you very much.
Arlene, it's been my pleasure.
Thank you for spending your time with me today and listening to this episode. Remember to subscribe so that you can receive weekly updates. And if today's message resonated with you, please remember to share it with a friend, a colleague, or a loved one who could really benefit from this episode.